Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of Talking Away The Taboo. I am thrilled tonight to bring on my incredible consultant, co-worker, amazing person, all around, Aliza Konig, who is going to be moderating a panel on surrogacy right here. And I'm bringing her on. Tonight, let me just bring everybody on here. So tonight is a really special night. So Aliza, this is the first time we're having a guest. Okay, you're here. Okay.
Sorry.
This is the first time we're having a guest panelist. I should actually, let me take that back. I said that's completely not the right way. This is the first time we're having a guest host. I am actually out, and Aliza is going to take over, and she is going to. Here we have Reena. Hi,
Hi.
Reena. So nice to meet you. We've actually never met in
In
person,
person.
so and I'm just waiting for Chana, and then Chana's going to come on
She
also.
just texted that she's on. She just doesn't know how to join. I'm gonna WhatsApp her and I don't know. Does she have to? I mean, I saw ask to join as soon as I joined the live. Should I tell her to do that again? I don't know
Yeah,
how to do this.
tell her to join. Guys, this is welcome to new technology. We are just making sure everybody's here, and then I'm going to turn the reins over to Aliza, and I'm going to mute myself out, and Aliza is going to take over. In the meantime, maybe Aliza, do you want Reena to introduce herself?
Yeah, that would be great. Rena, why don't you give a quick intro to who you are?
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Reena. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, perfect. So basically, I'm a mom of three children. I got to surrogacy a really crazy way. I'm a cancer survivor. So for me, it really just happened very suddenly that we were faced with this. So I can, tell that quick story of my cancer diagnosis. So basically, I am married to my husband, Jason. We have a daughter. She was about one at the time. And we got pregnant relatively easily. Um, and then after that, what happened was I was having a lot of bleeding postpartum. And this was months going on, going back to my doctor, kind of getting brushed off that it was normal, that I had fibroids, that it wasn't really affecting my life that much. And until it was, there's not much to do, just live with it. But I was really concerned because I knew we always wanted to have more than one child. That's, what we always envisioned. So over time, it got worse and worse. I was basically hemorrhaging blood. I was going to the mikvah all the time. It was like a game of like, can I go to the mikvah? When can I go? It was really hard. And in the end, the short story is I ended up having a tumor in my uterus. It was called endometrial stromal sarcoma, a really rare type of cancer, super rare for someone my age. None of it made sense, but this is what happened, it was just meant to be. So it was really devastating at the time. I was 28, and it was really scary. My husband and I, we were so young, and we had a 1-year-old, and we didn't know, will I get through this? Do I need chemo? Will I live? Will my daughter have a mom? So that was like the first piece, was just dealing with the loss of, my health and all that. And the next step was really trying to figure out what to do since I had this uterine cancer. So the first thing that they told me was I had to have a hysterectomy. It was the only thing I could do. And when I was first told this, I said to the doctor, like, are you sure I really have uterine cancer? Like, I was just in denial. Are you sure I have to have a hysterectomy? Like, I want to have more kids. Can't you just let me just have one more kid? Like, let's just do this really quickly and then you'll take out my uterus. And they were like, I don't think you understand, like, how serious this is and how deadly this cancer could be. Like, if you don't do this, you're not going to be around for the daughter that you have. So, luckily people were really honest with me and told me what I needed to do, and obviously like from that point on I was willing to do what I needed to do to be healthy. So our only option was surrogacy or adoption. We decided that surrogacy was the option that we wanted to go with, and we were really lucky that I ended up having the hysterectomy. I recovered really really well. Then we were able to freeze embryos. So I still have my ovaries, so we were able to do that. And so that was, really, really amazing that we got to do that. And then we got to the point of, how are we going to do surrogacy? And it was really a daunting thing to think about. This was about 7 years ago. And I knew Aliza at the time, but I think you were probably expecting your first baby, Aliza, at the time. And so there weren't that many people to talk to. I called everyone I could think of, like rabbis, every Jewish organization out there. There was no I was supposed to have a baby back then. I wish there had been. It would have been really nice. But friends of friends, acquaintances, people tried to connect me, and there were a few people that I ended up connecting with that were really lifelines for me at the time, that were able to say, like, I did it. You can have the family that you always dreamed of, and it won't be the way you imagined, but you can still do this. So those people were really crucial in helping me out, and our family and friends, like the people that we told about, wanting to do surrogacy, they were really supportive. So we were really lucky to have that community. And because I was diagnosed with cancer, whereas most people are probably really secretive about their, what's going on and when they decide they want or need to do surrogacy, we were kind of blessed in a ridiculous way with this cancer, as horrible as it was, that we were able to kind of be open with people about it, that I had this cancer diagnosis, that I was having a hysterectomy, and that I wanted to do surrogacy. So it was kind of easier for us to share with people, what we wanted to do. So our friends were, and our family was really there for us the whole time. So we were really lucky in that sense. So basically my oncologist at the time said, let's wait about a year until you have hopefully, clean margins, make sure all your scans are clean, and then you can pursue surrogacy. We don't want to jump into something like this and God forbid you're sick and your cancer comes back and you're expecting this baby. It would just not be a good situation. So I took that year to, get better. But at the same time, I knew how hard a surrogacy journey is and how long it takes and how much goes into it, that I started working on it. We didn't, do anything, but I was in the background making phone calls to agencies, posting on Facebook groups and trying to learn as much as I could to be ready that, once I hopefully got that all clear sign from my doctor, that we could go full steam ahead with the transfer.
Thank you. Amazing. We have Chana. Perfect timing. Okay. Thank you, Reena. And I'm going to cut you off here.
Sure.
Aimee, you're going to go. Thank you so much.
I'm going to go and take this over. Chana, it's so nice to meet you. And Aliza, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. It's an honor. Okay, let me just get situated here. Okay, so Chana, welcome. Sorry for the struggle of joining the live.
I'm sorry too,
no,
but
okay.
I'm glad to be here.
It's okay. I had like a panic attack the first time I did it because it's very stressful if you've never done it before. So just to catch you up, first of all, welcome everybody. We kind of jumped in, but I want to take one step back and really give a little framing to the program. So for those of you who don't know, I am the Aliza Konig. I'm the surrogacy consultant for I Was Supposed to Have a Baby. You've probably seen me on lives here. I've done podcasts with Aimee and a bunch of other organizations discussing surrogacy. I'm a big advocate for it. Thank God, was blessed with 2 children via surrogate. And tonight's going to be a little bit less about my story, but I wanted to introduce everybody here to 2 amazing women. Reena Bloom just shared how she got to surrogacy and her health struggles and surviving cancer. And Chana's going to share her story now about how she came to surrogacy, what brought her to utilizing surrogacy. So Chana, if you want to give a brief biographical introduction to who you are and how we connected essentially through surrogacy.
Sure. Hi, everybody. So I have 2 sons. One is almost 16 and one is 14. The first one was born a month early, but nobody really thought anything about it. I did not realize I was in labor. I just had a standard medical checkup on my way to law school. So I had my laptop in my backpack and he was like, "You're 8 centimeters dilated, head to the hospital." So that's how my oldest son was born. But again, like it didn't really seem like a red flag. He wasn't even officially premature. But when we had our second, he was born at 28 weeks, also took us by surprise. I didn't feel myself in labor. And if he wasn't breech, he would have been born in the toilet. So he was in the NICU for a few months, and it was touch and go. Thankfully, he was discharged and he's healthy. But after that, we realized that we definitely will need to see a specialist if we plan on having more children, which, growing up as one of 10 in my family, my husband's one of 7, and being in a frum community, we certainly had planned. So we decided to try to get pregnant shortly after, and we were monitored. I was going for weekly checkups at that point with a specialist. And then it was kind of like we watched our miscarriage happen in slow motion. Every week we would go, and it was just like issues with my cervix were getting worse. And then we lost that baby just when I was getting into my 5th month. It was a girl, and it was really devastating. And we were both reeling each in our way. For me, it was like very much the physical loss of that particular baby. And for my husband, I think it was much more sort of this like loss of the idea that we were going to have the family that we wanted to have or any more kids. So we took some time. Like, we went to see a few specialists. We decided we're going to have a plan. We'll see 3 different specialists. We'll decide what our options are, and then we are going to table it, and we're not going to think about it anymore. And that's what we did. We saw 3 different specialists. We got 3 different contradictory answers. One specialist had one piece of advice for me. The other specialist said that I'd put my body in grave danger if I followed that specialist's advice. So we weren't really any closer to knowing what to do, which complicated our imagination about what we want in the future, because we didn't have any particular plan. And so for the next few years, we did a lot of work on our marriage. We did a lot of just trying to accept what we had and enjoy the 2 boys that we realized we so miraculously had. Fast forward 5 years, and my boys at this point were 8 and 9 years old, and we realized this is not everything we want. We really want to try for something else. And we started looking into different options, adoption and me becoming pregnant or surrogacy. Based on what the specialist had said, me becoming pregnant was just too risky. And so it was down to adoption or surrogacy. And we decided to give surrogacy a try. It was so scary, and we felt completely and utterly alone. And it was at that point that we met Aliza. We met Reena first, I think, on one of these like Facebook groups. My husband's name was very identifiably Jewish, I think, so Reena reached out, and then you were like kind of this lifeline, and you connected us with Aliza, and then the 3 of us and another couple, we got together, and it was like the most amazing, like sort of like grabbing onto a branch amid the storm. And then 3 short years later, our daughter was born, and she's almost 3 years old now.
I can't believe it. So just so people, thank you, Chana, can understand, for those of you who haven't heard my story, I came to surrogacy because I had a kidney transplant and it was too difficult for me to carry. So all 3 of us came to surrogacy because of different health-related issues. And what separates, or differentiates, I should say, Reena, Chana, and myself is that Reena and Chana actually both carried children before they went to term to surrogacy. I never carried a baby. I found out that I was sick shortly before I got married, but then it got worse after I got married, and then was told not to even consider getting pregnant. So we each came to this point in our lives, very differently. But I like to call it medically induced infertility, in the sense that it was because of a medical issue that we could not carry again. There certainly are people who I work with and who are in our community who have unexplained infertility and try for years and years and years and never successfully have a child, and then they turn to surrogacy. So we each came to it for different reasons. So before we even go further into those reasons, a lot of times we see that the women are the ones who do a lot of the talking about their surrogacy experiences. And we in our group have discussed, and I keep referencing the group, I run a WhatsApp group that now has close to 90 people in it. Like Reena said, she was right after my son. I was actually on maternity leave with my son, and Reena's sister-in-law, I think, contacted me and said, I heard you had a baby via surrogacy. Can Reena talk to you? And Reena was the first person that I consulted with, I would say. And then she connected me with Chana. And then we, like Chana just said, we had a 4th couple come, and we had a Saturday night get together in our apartment, and it grew from there. And each of us had that same feeling of, we're so alone, and yet we finally found community. And we've each grown so much from each other's experiences. But one of the things that often happens is the women seem to connect a lot around this. But thank God each of us have husbands, and there are people in our community who are going to become single moms by choice. But I think a lot of us shoulder that burden of it's our bodies who failed us, and our ability to have a child or carry and grow our families, because obviously our husbands are not going to be the ones to do that. So I would love to hear from you both. Where were your husbands in this process emotionally, and were they on the same page the whole time? Reena, you want to go first, and then we'll switch the order going back and forth.
Okay, so my husband was 100% on board. Thank God, he was really supportive. He wanted to do this just as much as I did. Because we were faced with this, sudden diagnosis, we were very quick to try to figure out how to fix the problem, basically. So we were full steam ahead with that. I did most of the work, to be honest. I did almost everything. I said, you deal with the legal stuff and like the financial, and I'll do everything else. And it was like another full-time job on top of my actual job. So it was a lot of legwork. But the relationship with the surrogate was kind of me and her. And then, he didn't really have that same relationship that I did. So it was probably hard for him. And I feel like as a man, you can feel really alone because you're like, even more so with a regular pregnancy, you're out of it because, it's not your body, it's your wife, and you can't do anything to help. Now he really can't do anything to help. So he's definitely a little bit left in the dark, but thank God I had his support. And I didn't explain this yet to everyone, but we actually have 2 children via surrogate. So one of them is 4, and he was born via actually a Jewish surrogate, and she was incredible, the most amazing person. We're still, in touch. She came to his Upsharon, which was really special and nice. But she didn't want to do it again, which is fine. A lot of people, they want to do surrogacy one time to, change the world, do a nice thing, and that's amazing. So we had to look for another person when we decided that we wanted to have one more child. So this time around, we didn't use a Jewish surrogate, so it was very different. It was a little bit harder to convince my husband for this 3rd kid, to be honest. But once he was on board, then he was on board. So that's pretty much, the quick story on that.
Thank you. Chana?
I think between the 2 of us, my husband was like much more devastated by not having sort of the family we had anticipated, and I had accepted a little bit more the smaller family, and we kind of came to it with different longings also. For him, it was sort of like growing the family, not feeling like complete. And for me, there was some of that, but there was like a very strong longing to have a daughter. I grew up with like one of 7 sisters, and it's just like the idea of that really, really, it just had such a hold on me. So we were both probably equally invested and motivated, but we have different styles. I'm an attorney, so I was like very, very into like the fine print. I was researching everything ad nauseum, which sometimes that's helpful, and sometimes it just has you running in circles. It definitely was partly like to soothe my own anxiety about a world where I felt I had so little control, both of my own infertility, but also about this world that was so unknown and sort of so secretive, and where I felt completely alone. So it gave me like a modicum of control. I had like my spreadsheets, and I had detailed comments on every Facebook comment that I saw, and I rated the Facebook comments based on how real they seemed. Anyway, so I did a lot of that kind of work, like a lot of the nitty gritty. But it was mostly characterized by like the 2 of us sort of being in this alone together. And it was a really incredible experience. We felt like we were in this storm, just holding on to each other for dear life. It brought a lot of closeness to the 2 of us. But there was also real strain. So like we had tried with one agency, and every time there was a disappointment or something fell through, it was hard not to point fingers. So, if he was the one who hadn't really done the research as thoroughly as I would have, it was hard for me to hold back from sort of blaming him for putting us in that position to have to deal with that disappointment or loss of like whatever money we put down. And when it came to me, he would get concerned that maybe I was like asking too many questions or pushing people too hard. So it definitely was like, when stress is that high, it definitely creates an opportunity for those kind of things. But overall, we were on the same page, thankfully. And like Reena, I was the one who did most of, like, I was the one who had the relationship with our surrogate. Lovely, wonderful person, still in touch with her. She also came, she and her family came. We brought them in for my daughter's first birthday, and we did an event where we each, me and the surrogate and her daughter and one of my sons all spoke at the event, talking about what the experience was like for them. It was really beautiful, very meaningful.
I was there. I remember it was very sweet. But just so people know, like not everyone has that close relationship with their surrogates. I, for example, had no interest in being friends with my surrogates after the delivery of our children. We used two different surrogates. The first one, she I think wanted to be my best friend, but I was not interested in that relationship. And the second surrogate totally was not interested in a friendship, and that was fine. Like the last time I spoke to her was over text the day after our daughter was born in May. I haven't heard from her since then. So everybody goes into these relationships very differently, and it's what suits you and what suits your relationship with your surrogate, with your spouse, etc. It's very personal. And talking about the personal side of it, let's discuss a little bit more about the, let's say, emotions related to getting to know your surrogate and trusting her. You like we just discussed, both of you carried children on your own. You know what it's like to be pregnant. You know the concerns. Having carried and then not carrying these children, what were your anxieties or concerns or feelings going into these pregnancies, because it was going to be such a different experience from your previous experience? Chana, you want to go first?
Sure. I think the hardest part for me was the trust. How do I trust a total stranger? How do I trust her not be doing drugs? How do I trust her to keep herself safe? How do I trust that she'll go to every doctor's appointment? How do I trust that she'll provide whatever my fantasy was of like this emotional, nurturing environment and like a pleasant and calm home, so that I could feel like all those months when I'm far, far away in another state, my baby is someplace safe. So both in the concrete elements of things that could actually impact a pregnancy, and also whatever I had gleaned from like, my own emotions about like bonding or what the child experiences in utero, or whatever like religious element of it. Hasidus specifically talks a lot about this, about like how much the baby absorbs. So that was definitely a lot, and it motivated me to send her gifts and to keep in touch and keep things very pleasant, both so I could kind of like be like, hey, you okay? Like, so I could get the reassurance, but also to try to make it as positive an experience for her. And also because I guess as if I felt like I was like sort of manifesting this positivity outward, hopefully it was going to land with my baby. One of the trickiest things, which I think is maybe a little bit like not what people would expect, is because my pregnancies were very difficult. I was extremely nauseous through all three of them, and depressed with the last two. And then the births were so traumatic. I had to also give birth to my daughter, who was a stillborn. So I had so much trauma associated with pregnancy and birth that it was such a tremendous relief to not have to do that in order to have a child. And so it was kind of this mixed thing where it was like this terrible thing that I had to outsource something so personal. And also it was such a huge relief that it wouldn't require, like me having another child wouldn't require my doing that. And with that came a lot of guilt, because what if my child, would lose out? First of all, what if something bad happened to them, like in utero? But also, what if they would lose out on whatever bonding might occur? While what I can say is that I bonded more with her, maybe because I wasn't so, finished with a pregnancy and then a very traumatic birth. The way I bonded with her was so much more quickly and so much more deeply than I had the opportunity with my boys. And so that idea of the bonding definitely didn't actually happen. But I continue in therapy to have to like work through whatever feelings I have about not having been the one to carry her, the guilt I feel about that, wondering how it might come up. I'm in school now. I'm a lawyer, and I also went to school for social work now. And for my thesis project, because this is an issue so close to my heart, I'm looking at the mental health impact of children born through surrogacy. And spoiler alert, they're all doing great.
Thank God, thank God. Yeah, and Chana and I, we just connected over that again as well, because I'm doing a PhD now with a focus on mental health and surrogacy and infertility, and we're going to be sharing a lot of resources. Reena, why don't you share with us your thoughts?
So in terms of the relationship with the surrogate, I agree with what Chana said a lot about trust. It's really hard to blindly trust. We had like a weird start to our surrogacy journey where I was really desperate to find someone, and my husband's a Kohen, so to try to make sure that our son would be a Kohen, we were looking for a Jewish surrogate, which is really, really hard to find. So there's these like Facebook matching groups, and we found this person. We felt so desperate because they're so hard to find that we kind of just went ahead with it. And she wasn't the right match for us. And there were a lot of, problems throughout, and the trust really wasn't there. And there were a lot of issues with it. We did one transfer, it didn't take, which doesn't have anything to do with the trust part, but it just a lot went wrong. Then our second transfer ended in a miscarriage at 11 weeks, which was so devastating. So at that point, our reproductive endocrinologist, Dr. Zalman Levine, who's amazing, by the way, if anyone needs, he's in New Jersey.
All of us had babies. All of us, our
Yes,
babies were born, thank God, to Dr.
yes.
Levine.
And
So big shout out to him.
Allison, if
Yes,
Allison's listening.
yes, we love Allison Butler.
So thank God, he was really honest with me, and he said, you're literally putting all of your eggs in one basket and you need to find someone new. And it was so scary to break away from that relationship with her that we'd built for so many years, and all the work that we'd put in to build that relationship, and all the money and all the time and the legal and everything. But we ended up ending it, and it was like breaking up with someone. It was really horrible. And we found someone new relatively quickly who was amazing, and it was just so different from the beginning. You could just tell. I could just tell, she was a really warm person, and she kept saying like, Reena, don't worry, like the baby's fine, everything's gonna be fine. And I was a nervous wreck the whole time because we dealt with this miscarriage, so I literally couldn't, I was holding my breath the entire time. I couldn't be happy, I couldn't be excited. And she was like, everything's gonna be fine, like don't worry about it. And I was worried, but at the same time, I didn't have to worry because I knew that she was, just a really wonderful person and was taking good care of our baby, and she did. So I was really grateful for that. And then with our second surrogate, really almost the same. It was a little different because she wasn't Jewish. It was a little harder to connect with her, just because the similarities were not the same. But she was really also, an amazing person. And then one of the other things in terms of trust and relationships, I would say, is that in terms of communication, it can be really hard to not be too overbearing as the intended mother, in terms of like, how often can I text them? They have their own life, they have their own jobs, they have their own families. I don't want to talk to them every single day and bombard them, but I also want to know that my baby's okay every single day. So it's that balance of like, okay, maybe I'll text her 2 to 3 times a week at most, I'll just check in. Like, how do I not be overbearing, but how do I show that I care? How do I show that I'm involved to her and the doctor? When our babies were born in different states that were very far away. We had to take airplane flights to get there. So, how do I stay connected without being too much and giving them space? So that was a really tough balance, and, it's something that I definitely struggled with throughout. But I think I did a good job, and so far we have a good relationship with both of them. So I'm really grateful for that.
That's great. I just want to take 1 minute to just clarify the Jewish surrogate, non-Jewish surrogate piece of it. So there are lots of rabbis, lots of different opinions. There are a number of rabbis who recommend, and everyone should ask this question to their personal rabbi. A lot of rabbis recommend using a non-Jewish surrogate because then it avoids issues of mamzerut, which is essentially your husband impregnating another woman, which would lead to a bastard child. I think I can use that word. But there are also rabbis, and then a baby, because it's born through a non-Jewish surrogate, needs to do what's called a gerus lechumra, which is just doing a conversion to like check off the box, even though it's your genetic material and your Jewish baby, because it was born through a non-Jewish woman. the rabbis then do a like a quick conversion. It's different than when an adult or another person converts. There's no second confirmation or anything like that at bar mitzvah. It's just a one-time thing. There are the rabbis who allow for Jewish surrogates and encourage it even, especially if you don't mind me speaking on your behalf. In Reena's situation where her husband was a Kohen and they wanted their son to be a Kohen, they didn't want to have to deal with the conversion piece of it or anything like that. So using a Jewish surrogate avoided that issue. And there are certainly rabbis who say that's a wonderful way to go. So it's really a personal thing between you and your rabbi and discussing that. And we can have a whole nother conversation about the conversion piece of it later on. But it's not a simple part emotionally. It can be very emotionally challenging for a lot of people. But those of us who have gone through it and discussed it are also happy to talk about that piece of it. But so I just wanted to give a little bit of information on that. I'm trying to think, let's go now. I want to be mindful of the time. Like we said, you both have older kids. So this is actually a great time. And ladies, I'm sorry, we had a whole conversation about this last week about what I was going to ask you, but I'm going to segue out for 1 second, but I think you'll be fine with what I'm going to talk about. So for those of you who are listening live, and for maybe those of you who saw the post earlier today on I Was Supposed to Have a Baby's platform, the post read, surrogacy can never be it can never be a secret or something like that, or surrogacy isn't a secret ever, and the following conversations have to happen before you have a baby. And with Aimee's permission, I'm bringing this up. I actually called Aimee right away when I saw that, and I was really upset about it because I actually don't agree with that comment or statement at all. I also think that the word, and maybe you saw her follow-up comments, she did, edit and modify. I think the word secret has a little bit of like a dirty connotation, and I think what we're referring to is privacy and private. Surrogacy can be a very private experience. And it's up to, I believe, as Reena used the terminology, intended mother, intended parents. Chana, Reena, and I, we are intended parents because we were the moms of our children. We have the right and the ability to keep whatever information we want private for the sake of our children, for the sake of our families, for the sake of our mental health, right? And we each approached it very differently, who we shared this information with. So both Chana and Reena, you guys had older kids. They to an extent must have known what was going on or knew the whole time what was going on. My son was 4 when our daughter was born a few months ago. He has no clue. He just thinks that we went to a place that had a great Chuck E. Cheese, and then his sister happened to have appeared. He still doesn't get it. He even recently asked me if we could go back to the place because he really liked the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game that they had at the Chuck E. Cheese nearby. So, that's the conversation we've been having so far. He did not question for 1 second, like, where did she come from, even though he's seen other women pregnant. And it's still like, is very surprising to me that he hasn't figured this out, and he's a really bright kid. But Chana, Reena, tell us a little bit about the conversations you had with your children, with your family members, when you told people, if you told people. Go ahead. Reena, you want to go first this time?
Okay. So our first time around, my daughter was 4, so she didn't really know until a few days before. We were like, okay, we're going to California and we're gonna go get a baby from the hospital. So that was kind of similar to your experience, Aliza. And then, as the years went on, we told her, mommy had cancer, and we explained that, my tummy wasn't working. So, this was our way of having a baby and giving her a sibling. But now that she's older, she definitely understands a lot more. And we've had to deal with that again now that our new baby, who's only a month old, when she was born, my oldest was 8. So it was a very, very different experience. So we had to hide it from her and my son pretty much up until we waited till like 2 months before to tell them, because I just didn't want to deal with the questions, and it was a lot of questions, and they were so excited when we told them that we were having a baby. They really were. But I don't think I could have handled it the whole way through, so we kept it, but I wanted to give them time to process it at the same time, so I didn't want to spring it on her now that she was 8 years old. And so and recently she actually said to me, why did you wait so long to tell us? And I said, I didn't want to deal with your questions the whole time. Like, it would have been really annoying. So in terms of our families, They knew pretty much like our close family, our parents and our siblings, pretty much the whole time. And we had, close friends, like really close friends that knew, but people are with our first surrogacy journey, we didn't tell anyone until the baby was born, really, surprise, we had a baby. Um, and then this time around, because my daughter was 8 years old and couldn't keep a secret, we had to tell people, and it wasn't really what we wanted. It was kind of scary to tell people when we were, so nervous every single time, that everything should go well, and there's just, a scary process. But we had to tell, everyone, and she told everyone. She announced it at her school. So it was a lot. It wasn't what we really wanted, but that's the way it had to be this time around.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally. We also, I mean, my son, like I said, did not know, because he also like tells the whole world everything. I went to Morocco last January, a year ago, for a trip for work, and he told his whole school that I moved to Morocco. And I was like, and this is why we don't tell you important information. Um, but and like you said, and Hannah, we want to get to you, and I know you actually have a very different answer. But I think people, it's funny. I've had friends who, carried their own babies, and I see them after they had a baby, and I think to myself, wow, I had no idea you were pregnant. And and that justifies for me why I don't feel like I need to tell anybody what's going on. Because if I don't live in the same state as you and I don't see you, you're never going to know if I'm pregnant or not. And we'll talk about some other points of that later. But there's so many unknowns with surrogacy that it feels so stressful and so personal and private that you don't want to tell people necessarily. But our second journey, we did tell our family earlier than we had with the first one, because they kind of knew we were going to do it again, so it's a really big part of the piece also. It's like when and how you tell people. But Hannah, why don't you share with us what your situation was?
Yeah, like you said, because my boys were already 8 and 9 years old, I felt like, well, there were a couple things going on. One, me and my husband were talking about this all the time. It completely overwhelmed everything in our life. When there was like a disappointing news, or even like when I went through an egg retrieval, and I was waking up every morning at like 6:30 a.m. and they had a babysitter coming every morning, and it was so bizarre. I felt their anxiety about it, but at that point I didn't feel like I could tell them. What am I going to tell them? Like, we don't even know what we're going to do with this. I just wanted to freeze my eggs so we had our options. We didn't do surrogacy until like a year or more later. So at that point, there was just like nothing to tell. But it was very uncomfortable not to be able to assuage their fears of like what's going on. Suddenly, our life has changed. And so when we started with the surrogacy stuff at the beginning, we didn't share anything with them. But then as things, it was like a 2-year process, like even before the pregnancy. So they would just see me and my husband in these conversations all the time, and then we would like get bad news. But how do we explain to our kids that there's like nothing bad happened? This is devastating for us, but they're okay and everything's okay. And so at a certain point, we felt like um, it would just be easier for us to not have to keep reassuring them if we just had it out in the open. Also, because we knew we didn't want them to have to keep this secret, because I felt like, one, it's a lot to ask 8 and 9 year olds, but also there's already so much like stigma and shame around this. I felt that maybe by me commenting on that, it could be mistaken by them or like understood implicitly to maybe mean that this is something that is maybe shameful or something that should be kept hidden. And so I sort of like wanted to push the opposite, which is, this is a beautiful way to have a baby, and it's scary. And then what ended up happening is they had a million questions. We had the funniest feedback we would get. Like my son, on the day of the transfer, he was in a day camp. His counselor was like his 15-year-old yeshiva buffer, and who always asked, "Does anybody have anyone to say Tehillim for?" And my son goes, "Yes, today is transfer day. Can we please say Tehillim for the embryo?" And the father had no idea what to do with himself. So my son starts to explain to him how if you have a sperm and an egg, and then you can implant. Anyway, so like somebody got like a real education that day. So we had like some really funny stories that came from it, but they were just so excited. They had so many questions. I was much more I had a much easier time fielding their questions for some reason. My husband really did not. Like he found it to be much more anxiety inducing, and he would actually be like, "Don't get excited." He was always telling them not to get too excited. And I was like, they could get excited and then they could also be disappointed. It won't be close to like what me and my husband would experience. Like I had to realize in their experience it's not going to be the same thing. So I wasn't so afraid of that. And then for the birth, we all flew for, it was like right after Pesach. So we all flew for Pesach to like in the middle of nowhere. And then she ended up being overdue. So we were there for a month. My sons had to go back home to school. And then because we had told my sons, we felt like we should just tell everybody instead of them making a comment. And then there's like the weird awkwardness of like, he said something, but they never said anything. So we decided to just be like very open about it. And I was aware that being so open meant people are going to be like expecting news, or if the transfer doesn't go well, I have to deal with everybody else's reaction to it. And I was like, I don't know that that's much worse than being completely alone and getting bad news and nobody has any idea like what kind of devastating thing just happened. So that was the path that we chose.
That's great. So it kind of just going back to the original post today, and talking about, getting devastating news or sharing really special news. One of the things that, that I was discussing earlier with Aimee was, someone needs to know how to respond when someone sees them and they're like, oh, you had a flat stomach yesterday and now you have a baby. And first of all, I never had a flat stomach. So whatever, when people actually have complimented me after having my baby, like, wow, you bounced back so quickly, you look great. And all I want to say is, first of all, stop body shaming me. Because like clearly, like it's none of your business how my body looks or doesn't look. But it's also none of your business. Like, why does everyone feel the need to comment if someone suddenly has a baby and didn't? Now, I guess it's strange. I get that. But a lot of why I do this is to kind of change the way our community thinks they need to say something, right? When there's a baby all of a sudden, or if a baby doesn't really look like their parent, right? We are in this world, there's a lot of egg donors or even sperm donor, right? There's going to be different genes in some of these babies. Thank God, that was not my case. And I was able to use our genetic material, but there are people that I know who have babies and like, people always like, but who does she look like? And why do we have to make these comments? So I'm curious for if you have any good advice for what did you say if someone said, oh, I had no idea you were expecting, or whatever it was, or maybe what was like the stupidest thing someone said to you and how did you respond? Because I think that's what gets people nervous a lot of the time. Either one of you want to go first if you have something off the top of your mind, because I didn't ask you to prepare that answer.
How much time do you have? I literally wrote a list at one point of like ridiculous things people said to me.
Oh my gosh.
One person asked me if I bring the baby to nurse by the main mother.
What is this? 1300s? Like, what's so crazy?
Somebody else gave me a bracha that Emir Hashem, one day I should have one of my own. Wow. Those were the words. One of my own. I found it. I was able to just treat it with humor, thankfully. In retrospect, I don't know how, but it was so ridiculous. And I just felt like people were so ignorant that it was hard for it to really hit me. That being said, obviously there's a lot for me to unpack. This is not a traditional way of having a child. I'm aware of this as I parent her. I'm aware of the fact that I might be like hypervigilant with her, and I might be more aware of how much bonding we have. And I am aware we're telling her the story of her birth starting from now, like using children's books about it. And it's not comfortable. And I'm aware she's going to have questions that might be difficult for me. And it's not easy, but overall, it has been just such a beautiful story where we have this happy, well-adjusted member of our family who's a member of our family. So I think it just doesn't hit hard. Mm-hmm. And then mostly it depends on the person. If the person was just like somebody I didn't care about, or, passing the street, I would just like ignore it or like walk on or smile and move away. And then if it was somebody who was being like kind of obnoxious, I'd be like, that's a really nosy question, To that, the person responded, I'm not being nosy, I just want to know. That was her response. So
I'm pretty sure that's the definition of being nosy.
That's it.
Wow.
But yeah, maybe like calling people on it, you know, just being like, that's a really personal question. How about you? How about you? Do you want to describe to me how you had your child? You know?
Seriously. One person actually once said to me, it's amazing that your kids actually look alike. And I was like, are you familiar with how genes work? Like, we didn't go to the supermarket and pick them out of the vegetable section. Like, okay. Reena, any great comments that you received?
I mean, I've gotten a lot of terrible comments.
Yeah.
I don't think that people mean it in a malicious way, typically. I think they just don't understand. Sometimes they literally don't know. Like, I've had people come, like, drop off a baby meal and be like, you look amazing. And I'm like, thank you. Like, do not know. And it's so awkward. And I typically don't correct people when I get a comment like that because it's just not worth it. But, you know, if it needs to be corrected, I'll correct them. You know, people have said stupid things to me, like, you're so lucky that you don't have to go through all this pain. And I would give anything to feel the pain and be able to carry my children. But, you know, that's just not what it is. And people don't realize that, like, they're just more thinking about themselves than they are about me. And, you know, that's fine. Everyone's always thinking about, you know, how everything affects them. But I can't even remember all of them.
Yeah.
Um,
The best one I got, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The best one I got, I had told an older colleague before our son was born, because I supervised her and I was leaving work a few weeks early. And I had just told her that I was expecting a baby via surrogate. And she's like, you know, I thought you looked different. And I'm like, I literally just told you I'm not pregnant. I'm not really sure what to make of this conversation. It was so crazy. I was like, clearly you don't understand what I'm saying to you.
Really?
But yeah, it was special. Chana, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, I think that a part of it was when I accepted that I don't have to be honest. Like, this is not the concept of honesty doesn't apply here in the same way. There isn't like a virtue or a value to having to correct people like, no, I'm not the one who's pregnant. So if it's not somebody who's like in my family or doesn't need to know, I'll just be like, thank you, you know, you look great, thank you. And that was like a huge relief. The other part was like telling myself, you don't have to create your daughter's future and educate everybody so that she has a better world that she's coming into, because that's too much pressure. And so, like, sort of letting myself off the hook from having to correct people or having to educate people, that took a lot of the weight off.
Yeah, that's great. So I think we're going to wrap up. If either of you have any closing comments you would like to share, or ideas, or anything, you know, words of strength, chizuk, that you want to share with somebody who's considering surrogacy or anything, please share.
I mean, I would just say that, you know, the reason why I share is to help other people, because I remember the feeling of feeling so helpless, so out of control, and feeling like I had to reinvent the wheel and like no one had ever done this before. But I just want people to know that you're not alone. There's us, there's a whole community. I was supposed to have a baby, and, you know, it's not impossible. It does take a lot of work. Surrogacy, the process is really hard. There's a lot of really difficult parts and a lot of moving pieces, and I'm not going to deny that. But if you want to have a baby and it has to be via surrogate, you know, it's possible, and your baby will feel like yours when your baby is born. And, you know, it might be hard during the pregnancy, but once you have that baby in your arms, you know, everything else just goes away, all the stress and all the worry. So people should just know that, you know, there is an option out there for you if that's what you choose to do.
That's great. Chana?
Yeah, I echo everything that you said. I think that, like, it is possible and normal people do it. I think that a lot of what kept me from doing it was I didn't know a single person who did it, and it was just so sci-fi-ish and so out there that I was like, who chooses this and who would be a surrogate for this? But there are so many people who want to help other women, and for whom pregnancy and childbirth is not, like, most of them do this because their pregnancies have been relatively easy and their births have been relatively easy, and so it's not like this huge altruistic sacrifice. It's a combination of like really wanting to help in this incredibly meaningful way, and very unique, and whatever the compensation is, I'm sure doesn't hurt. But you know, there are so many women out there who are doing it for the right reasons and who are trustworthy. And you're also, like, Aliza has my contact info if anybody wants to reach out to me. This has become like a passion project for me. my new niche as a lawyer is surrogacy law, because it's been such an incredibly meaningful experience for me, and I want to help other people in it. And so if anybody's considering it, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And I was going to give you a plug that Chana was our lawyer for our second journey, and we loved working with her. And I've certainly recommended her to a number of people in our community, and I think a number of them have utilized you as well in your services. And it's you know, I think for us, our first journey, we had this ridiculously inexperienced lawyer who our agency had assigned to us, and being that she had never gone through the experience, it was so difficult. And Chana, being a mom through a surrogacy journey, made our experience that much more meaningful and easy and understandable. And it was a real bracha and blessing that we had Chana in our lives. So thank you, Chana. And Reena, your friendship, both of you, though, your friendship over these last few years, as we all expected babies actually around the same time, was really special. And I really appreciate that you guys took the time and you shared so openly. It really means so much to me and to our growing community. And for anyone out there who, like Chana said, has any questions or wants to connect, please feel free to reach out. I am reachable at aliza@iwassupposed-to-have-a-baby.com. Yeah, I think, or .org. Try them both. I'm not really sure. And like Reena said, surrogacy is an incredible option for those who can afford it and who have the emotional strength to do it. It's not easy. As you heard from each of us, it took a number of years for each of us to have each of our babies. I think it seems to me like the average time is about 2 years per pregnancy. So, you know, be in touch if you have any questions or anything we can do to help you. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and just good health to everybody, and have a great night. Thank you so much, Aimee, for having us on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aliza, for arranging this.
Yeah.
My pleasure. Thank you both. I don't know how this is going to end. Hopefully Amy's listening and she's going to end this call, but I guess everybody can just leave when we're ready, but I'll text her.
Yeah. But also, if anyone wants to contact me as well, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I think our handles are on the flyer, but anybody can email me through I was supposed to have a baby, and I can connect them as well.
Thank you.
Right. And
have a good night.
Reena, I hope you have an easy night with your baby.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye, guys.